Churchill's reason to remain as Prime Minister. It was time to go. On the 4th of April, 1955, Winston and Clementine hosted a farewell dinner at number 10. The following day, Churchill was driven to Buckingham Palace, where he offered his resignation.
I am getting much older. Now the stimulus of responsibility and power has fallen from me. I totter along in the shades of retirement.
By 1958, Churchill had completed his final book, A History of the English-Speaking Peoples. He chose to end it before the First World War, when Britain and its empire was still a great power.
He was in a dark mood, he was very depressed, and I tried to cheer him up. I said, how can you be so depressed when you've had a career which nobody else in the world can have had, the wars and all, and which you'd emerged triumphant. And he said, yes, what you say is accurate, but I've worked very hard all my life, and I've achieved a great deal, in the end, to achieve nothing. He wanted a Great Britain in a peaceful world. Didn't get either. Very sad. He thought that everything he'd done had been in vain.
Churchill's mood improved in the warmth of the south of France. The villa of his friend Max Beaverbrook became a second home. Churchill would spend his days immersed in his favourite pursuit, painting. Happy are the painters, he said, for they shall not be lonely. In September 1958, Winston and Clementine celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in Monte Carlo with their son Randolph and granddaughter Arabella. Churchill and Randolph had long had a stormy relationship.
In the latter years, invariably, their meetings would end up in rows. And my grandfather was an old softy when it came to dealing with his son. And I think so much of it is the sort of psychological baggage that he had from his appalling relationship with his own father.
Desperate not to repeat his father's neglect, Churchill had helped turn his son Randolph into a spoilt and bitter man. Their relationship reached a low point on one of Churchill's many cruises aboard Aristotle Onassis' yacht, the Christina.
All three generations were there, my father, my grandfather, and myself. After dinner, my father, well tanked up on Scotch whiskey, went into the attack verbally against his father and abused him.
It all was too much for Randolph. It suddenly came out, one boiling rage at dinner, with his father being perfectly polite to him, and him getting on well with everybody. Why did you do this and that, and why wouldn't you speak to me? And terrible. And Ari and I arranged for Randolph to leave the yacht from Corfu. I took him on shore. I kept him company. He was very silent, and I saw he was weeping. And he said, "It's so difficult, Anthony. I always loved that man. I can't get on with him."
Churchill's health was in sharp decline. A series of strokes and a broken hip left him immobile and withdrawn. A friend said, "The fight has gone out of him." In 1964, he resigned from Parliament.
He eventually had to stand down as MP for Woodford, and he was told that the local association wanted to select a younger man. He was not best pleased at all, and he said, "Oh, I shall go down and make them a speech." But of course, he was no longer up to going down and making them a speech, and so his days as a member of Parliament were at an end after 60 years. It was a moment of great sadness for him.
On his 90th birthday, crowds gathered outside his house in London. Ever the showman, Churchill greeted them. A month and a half later, he suffered a final stroke.
I was playing bezique with him, and he finished a hand, put the cards down, and he fell forward with his face on the card table. And I rang for the nurse, and I took his pulse, which was non-existent. I couldn't feel it at all. And then he revived a bit, and before they carted him off, because he couldn't walk, he said, in a very strong voice, took my hand again and said, "No more." And I think those were his last words.
Churchill died on the morning of the 24th of January 1965, 70 years to the day after the death of his father. His life had begun at the height of the British Empire. His death coincided with its demise.
He said, "I remember I want lots of military bands at my funeral." He got 9.
"I am ready to meet my Maker," Churchill had said. "Whether my Maker is prepared for the great ordeal of meeting me is another matter."
My mother and I and Sarah were in the first coach. The carriage had quite big, clear glass windows, so one could see very clearly people's faces. And people just were so reverent and recollected, and it was extraordinary. I'll never forget it.
It was a ceremony of triumph. We were giving thanks for an extraordinary life. I think there was a feeling of strength in that congregation and pride that Winston Churchill had represented our country.
I stood to attention and gave him a good salute as he passed. I don't think there's a canvas big enough to paint a picture of that man. Some of the younger people must have wondered what the fuss was, but the older didn't.
The memories I have of that day, of the outpouring of grief of affection. And then the most moving train journey that I've ever made in my life. We head out through the south of London, out onto the Great West Line. And of course the route had been well publicized, and so at every level crossing, in every little allotment and garden, there were people standing there, small children clutching their Union flags, old soldiers with their medal ribbons on, some in wheelchairs, were giving a last salute. It was a real tearjerker.
Churchill was laid to rest in Blaydon churchyard, next to his parents, within sight of his birthplace, Blenheim Palace.
Good night, then. Sleep to gather strength for the morning. For the morning will come. Brightly will it shine on the brave and true. Kindly on all who suffer for the cause. Glorious upon the tombs of heroes. Thus will shine the dawn.